Diego Cordovez.
Adam Schoenfeld.
Welcome to The Scoop, brought to you by Full Tilt Poker.
Full tilt.
We had David Plastik on last week.
I have one word for you, Diego. Plastic. The future is plastic.
The future is now.
There was another incident, at the WPT almost final table. Well, I mean, it was the final table, but it was still 7 players where, I had a blow up. Mm-hmm. And again, it was something that caught me by surprise because I had enough chips to make, it was early WPT. It was, one Phil Gordon, one a Bay 101. Adam was there. Adam was deep.
David busted me.
I knocked Adam out.
Right.
He tried to bluff me. Or, he made a move on me.
Yeah.
Forget what it was.
And you had
Deuce 10 or something. Yeah, Jack Deuce, I think he had.
Right.
It was like,
it doesn't matter what my cards were.
No, I know that. But it didn't have to be. You had like that.
Your claim is Ace Queen. Dave's,
who do you bluff? You bluff a good player.
Right.
So you happen to have it.
Exactly. And and we were down to 7 players, and it was a long struggle. And and I want to say I picked up aces. Casey Castle just got knocked out 8th. Me and him were struggling, trying to get in, but I built up my stack a little, and I wasn't short anymore. I said to myself, I'm not gonna miss this final table unless the inevitable happened.
Right.
And of course, the inevitable happened.
The TV final table of 6.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, Phil Gordon's got all the chips. He's got, a mess load of chips. He's cracked aces the whole night, gets a bunch of people. And again, he comes out and he just limps in under the gun, like 10,000. And I look down, I got 2 aces. And, I quickly make it 35,000. I'm not going to still play it. Another guy enters a pot and makes it some outrageous amount, like 150. I mean, he only had like 60,000 left, and didn't
after that.
And Phil Gordon, who to my opinion can't read a situation, decides to go all in.
Right.
And I literally popped out of my seat. I mean, literally, it was like the ejection seat. I flew up like, oh my! I mean, I called so fast. This other guy like mucked it before I even called.
Right.
It was so obvious.
What did Phil have? A pair?
2 jacks.
Okay.
Yeah. But raise, limp, raise, re-raise,
right.
And 7 players left. You got to, like I said, the situation should have read itself, but
So Phil went on to become Team Full Tilt.
Yeah, exactly.
Host of Celebrity Poker.
You could have
and exactly, and I disappeared into obscurity. And had to blow up and start, and it was like, it was really frustrating because you didn't want that to happen.
But you're right that as is always the case in poker, one card can be the difference in going on and winning the tournament or finishing 7th. Yeah. And being on TV or not, which is a big deal.
Yeah, sure.
And also, we're joking because you're not in obscurity, although you're not in the line, you're not in the spotlight right now.
Right.
But we've talked about this many times.
I don't got the Full Tilt millions either.
You're one big win away from being a big TV personality because you are a made-for-TV guy because your look, your personality, you're very charismatic. So. In some ways, it's unfortunate that you haven't gotten the spotlight, but on the other hand, you still can get the spotlight.
You'd be a perfect character in contrast to kind of the typical, brainy 23-year-old. He's been playing on the internet. You've got a whole story.
Yeah, exactly.
But to Adam's point, I do think that because there's so much focus on a couple of big tournaments, that while you're not in obscurity, it's an enormous achievement to make your living playing poker, playing tournament poker specifically, because it's one thing to play in the cash games where you have kind of a steady income.
You win a couple. You win more than
I mean, you can go
once a month.
Be a great player, go for a long dry spell, and without sponsorship, without other ancillary income. I mean, to survive for over a decade, traveling around with all the expenses that are involved.
And I've traveled.
Yeah, and you travel around.
You've traveled all over the world.
There isn't many countries I haven't played poker in.
You played poker in Australia. You played poker in Macau. You played in Russia. You played in the Philippines. These are all true, right?
Singapore. I played in all over Europe.
And you played
Barcelona, London,
Latin America.
All over Latin America.
But playing tournament poker, I mean, it can drive you crazy. I think.
And it has,
Right, at
and it
times.
stressed me out, and it's gained me 60 pounds. I mean, I was, I wasn't, I was about
Lost your
200
hair?
pounds. Yeah, well, yeah, I think that was going to happen anyways. But the stress, definitely, makes you do things that, bad habits,
A lot of people don't understand backing. Even a lot of people who are now coming into poker, they're used to playing on the internet. And if you're going to make it as a long-term tournament player, for the most part, even the most famous players,
Yeah.
a lot of them are backed. And for most of the time,
More than you think. More what we know,
Right.
or more than, the world
just
knows.
because of the ups and downs.
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously the math is simple in that to travel around and play all these tournaments now, where there's $10,000 tournaments every month and tons of other tournaments, you've got to have an enormous bankroll. And for the most part, you've been backed.
Yeah.
It's very common. I mean, what extra stress does that ever create for you? I've always thought that it would create a lot of extra pressure.
It does,
Maybe not.
because you don't want, you hate to have to always explain. You kind of have to explain to or something, or live up to somebody, someone's disappointed in you, and I don't like to disappoint people. I was like, I enjoy. I mean, I like winning for my boss rather than or winning for a backer rather than winning for myself. But
Does it ever
but
make you
losing
play-
for it makes
Does it ever make you play differently?
at times, but also gives you a little more comfort in other spots. At times of in the middle of the tournament or some other things, or some people just say, I'm glad you went for the win or did that, or they're not ashamed. But I even though they're not as upset as I am sometimes.
Well, there are certain times, and we talked about one where I made a play where when the hands get turned over against you, it looks
Yeah.
stupid because you have
Right.
jacks and I have jack
Right,
deuce or
yeah.
something. But there are times when that might be the correct play.
Right,
but
because
don't-
and if you know about someone's history.
But when you go out on that play and now you have to explain that to your backer, that might be awkward, or they may not
Yeah.
understand that
Right.
why you did that.
So
Right.
do backers actually get involved with actually analyzing your play?
Some of
or
them did.
criticizing?
Some of them have done. Or you always wonder if that's going to be the end of your, your basically your
relationship.
gig and your relationship, and if you're going to have to go find another one. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. Sometimes, I've had a number of different people invest in my, success, and it's
Yeah.
and it's it's been up and down for some people. Some people, it's been, and I've been on that side too.
the
I
thing-
started off as a, before
You
as a
backed,
poker player.
yeah.
Before as a,
I remember.
I mostly backed people. I came into this business with money. And I got, I get basically, people like, the late Amir Vahidi and a few other people latched onto me right away, and and said, "Oh, can you put me in this?" So I understand both sides of it. And I was a
remember-
tough ball. I was a tough guy.
I remember you as
Tough boss.
I remember you as
I
a
get
backer,
mad.
and I don't know what led to it. But
Really?
I
You
remember,
would get mad?
I remember watching a heated argument where I didn't want to get involved, but I just kind of was hovering on the periphery in case
Right.
I needed to step in before the security came between you and a very well-known player, and you were
I'd like to hear who that was.
heatedly reprimanding him for something. And now I don't know whether it was his play or something that he'd done ethically or unethically, but I just thought, and there was about even at that time, maybe 100-pound weight disparity, and I thought, this could be a very, very serious situation. David Plastik does not seem happy. But yeah, you've lived both sides of it, which is interesting.
Yeah,
And
and I understand it, and I still do take small pieces of people here and there, and I still, get involved, and would do it again if I had, sometimes I had the income that some of these people have.
the thing is that you are a long-term winner. I mean, we know in poker anyone can get hot for a while.
Right.
You've been a consistent winner for
Right.
over a decade, which is
Yeah.
a strong track record. But that doesn't mean that even over months or even over years that a backer is going to necessarily succeed.
No.
Someone can come in and it's going to be a frustrating stretch at times.
I mean,
And
I've
they
had
have
some
to know
people
how to deal with it.
that quit me after a couple months. Then the next guy came on and had a great run and made, a couple $100,000 over 1 year, because I had one really substantial year, and he jumped in right at the right time, and and it was, and I had win after win after win, and I was in the top 10 of the player of the year and so on, and it just and.
But I'm just saying that
perfect
people have to
timing.
be able to ride it out without the
Yeah,
emotion.
and they don't.
No.
Sometimes they don't realize that.
Adam's
And
been a
I've
backer
done
at
that.
times. I shouldn't publicize this because now you'll get some unsolicited requests. But
I'm one of the few. I'm way up for my backing, but I've done it very
you've done this
judiciously.
rare one-shot.
Well, yeah,
deals.
I have only had I have not backed someone where there's a makeup deal. I just back people for one shot, and amazingly, a lot of them will come in.
And amazingly, the only time they came in their entire lives was the day that they were backed by Adam.
Right.
Lucky money.
Several
Lucky
cases,
money. Sometimes they say that's lucky. There are certain backers in this business. Certain people that have been around, and it's like whenever this guy takes a piece of you, you win.
Well,
it's like.
All of us have also been successful in our swaps, but this is an aberration, an outlier.
Yeah.
It's called Jeff Schulman effect.
And also made a bunch of money off a swap with Diego one time.
I was in such a negative, and then I thought I'd never get positive. But I was in such a deep, and then finally I more or less broke even. That shows you
you traded away so much money that
traded away so many, and other times too. So, Adam alluded to it before, but just to wrap up, before you got into poker, unlike a lot of people who their entire lives now have been poker, I mean, you had a really interesting life where you were a rock and roll photographer, really in the heyday of rock and roll.
Yes.
Like people talk about.
I wish it was a little after the
all
heyday,
this,
but yes, it was.
The tail end of the
80s was definitely a place.
And you were like in the inner entourage.
I definitely was. I started. I was a big music fan. I have a knowledge of music that not many people can top.
By the way, can I just
Adam
say, I thought that I had the most knowledge of classic rock of anyone, and I have extensive knowledge, you'll admit. David and I had a little contest where we were, and David destroyed me, and I've never met anyone else who could do that. He's amazing.
Yeah, and I
I know more about everything else.
I started going to concerts really young. I lived in New York City, and my father bought me a camera. I started bringing into concerts, just a total fan, and just did it as a hobby.
In the 70s?
And no, it was actually, it was
80s?
1980 I started in 1980. And I'm about 16 years old, and I would always get front row seats or close to front row seats. I was also a ticket scalper.
Right.
We waited all night, and we buy our tickets, and we get a few extras and sell a few extras.
The pre-Ticketmaster.
Ticketron. It was Ticketron back then.
I was just saying that it was before you buying the computer. You went and stood online.
Yes, you stood online, and the tickets were already printed. The tickets were already, full.
You saw and photographed a lot of the classic acts at Madison Square Garden, CBGB.
Yep. And I've been all the way. I went
Max's
to live.
Kansas City.
Yes, I went to Max's.
Max's Kansas City.
That place is the hardest place to photograph. Too. It was like the stage was lower than you were
this
standing.
is where, because I lived in Queens and I wasn't privileged in Manhattanite like you two.
I know both of us were.
And also, I didn't go to a Tony prep school like both of you. I had to go to public school.
Right, we all went to school in New York. I forgot that. Yeah, well,
no, but you became a freelance photographer.
Yeah.
Your work was in Rolling Stone and Billboard and all the
guitar
big
magazines and all that stuff. Yeah.
And you were traveling around like with the Rolling Stones and whoever taking pictures.
I flew to London for Live Aid in 1985. And back then, I literally had to sneak my. I didn't get a press pass. Right. I was upset about that, but it wasn't going to stop me. I flew there, and I'd sneak my camera in, and you had to sneak the film in, you had to sneak everything in, and luckily, I stood there. I mean, you got to see me on the broadcasts. I'm standing with a big camera on a tripod back in the back of by the soundboard. Getting great pictures.
You still? I'm sorry. You still sell some of your photos?
Sure,
Do you want to plug your website?
Yeah, sure. 80srockphotos.com.
80srockphotos.com.
Like
80S.
Yeah.
You could also just search under David Plastik, and you'll get tons of links into photos and things. I still sell. Lately, I've done a few album covers with some old compilations that come out. I still sell big artwork kind of photos that people hang on a wall. It's a side business.
This is the artistic side of David Plastik that people don't know. No, seriously, they don't know about it.
A lot of people don't know about it. And I have. I shot everybody from AC/DC, Madonna, Eddie Van Halen, Slash. Sam Kinison was a good friend of mine back then.
But that's the thing that in this era, it's not just that you were photographing them. If you're a photographer there, you're hanging out. You're getting the leftover groupies.
I did get some leftover groupies.
Whatever leftover drugs are there. I mean, the whole thing. You're living the lifestyle, even though you're not.
There weren't leftover drugs when I was around. They were all finished. Believe me, I finished them all.
Being buddies with Sam Kinison, this has got to be an intense.
It was
existence.
Unbelievable. Sam was like, I first discovered Sam while I was in college in Hartford, Connecticut. I saw him. He was on a Ronnie Dangerfield special. I said, this guy's like the funniest guy around. I was into comedy, and I saw it. And then I moved out to L.A. literally like 3 months later. at college, I graduated college, and I first moved out to LA to become a rock and roll photographer. And I see Sam Kinison is playing up the block for me at the world famous Comedy Store.
Right.
The first week I'm there, and I'm not even concentrating taking pictures. I just go there and see him. I actually took my father to my father was in town. I took him to the show, and the very next day I'm at a Ted Nugent concert, and opening up the concert was Guns N' Roses, which was unknown.
Man.
They were unknown then.
Right.
No one. I didn't know.
Opening act.
I didn't know who they were. Third on the bill. I didn't know. They didn't have an album out. Didn't know who they were.
Right.
I think I took a dozen pictures of them just because I saw some other people take pictures.
Oh, wow.
Didn't know. I just said there, and backstage I see Sam Kinison at the Ted Nugent concert. I'm like, I was. And I'm like about to go up, I go up to him and I tell him, I saw your gig last night, you're the funniest guy around. And he's like, oh, let me introduce you to Ted, I'm good friends with Ted, what are you doing? Just explain to who I was. Worked Billboard, he goes, Billboard magazine I worked for then, and he said, let me take you backstage, let me get a picture of two. And I said, no problem. I took a picture, and I got it published the next day, and me and Sam became friends just from that night. We went out, after that we went out for Thai food. Right. 3 o'clock in the morning, me, Ted Nugent, Sam. I'm a 22-year-old kid. I'm hanging out with Ted Nugent and Sam Kinison and all these other, comedians and everything.
Right.
And it was just like it was my first bit of really hanging out with stars. I really didn't hang out with many when I lived in New York, even though I knew a few.
And very intense stars.
And it was, but this was Sam being good this night because Ted Nugent is like the cleanest guy in rock and roll.
Right.
So
but
Sam really
not so clean.
Yeah, and so Sam was like, Sam was on his good behavior that night.
Right.
He was on his rock and roll because he loved rock stars too. He's a guitar player and he loved meeting rock and rollers. And then he said, come back tomorrow. Come back the next day. I showed him the picture, got the picture published, and Sam was little known then too. And then we basically hung out every night. And all of a sudden I got introduced to a few recreational drugs that
Right. may
have got the better of me a couple years later.
That's a long time ago now.
But it's a very long time ago, but it was definitely, it's definitely a high point, of, it's something you want.
You've lived an interesting life, David Plastik.
Yes, I've lived an interesting life.
All right, on that note, thanks for coming by The Scoop, one of our most diverse backgrounds. Yeah. And thanks for joining us on The Scoop, brought to you by Full Tilt Poker. Rent us at The Scoop at carplayer.com.